Someone disrespected you, and the worst part wasn't what they said. It was that you didn't know what to do. You froze, or you laughed it off, or you exploded and lost. Either way, they walked away with something that wasn't theirs to take. The problem isn't them. The problem is your brain wasn't running the right program. When you're disrespected, your status circuit fires, your threat detection spikes. And most people respond with panic, not power. Machiavelli understood this. He was surrounded by people who would destroy him if he showed the wrong signal at the wrong moment. He didn't have the luxury of just be the bigger person. He had to know exactly what to do, every time. Disrespect is not a personal attack. It's a calculation. Someone is running the math. How much can I take from this person, and what will it cost me? Your job isn't to punish them. It's to change the math. These 7 rules do exactly that. By the end of this, you'll know what to do in the moment, not after, not in your head at midnight, in the room, with precision. Let's go. Rule 1, go quiet, not silent. You're in a meeting. You put forward a real idea, something you thought about, something that has merit, and someone cuts across you. Dismisses it in 2 words. Or worse, waits 5 minutes and repeats your point like it was theirs, and the room nods. Or you're at dinner with people you know. Someone makes a comment. Sharp. A little too personal. Delivered with a smile so it has plausible deniability. Everyone else at the table goes quiet. They're watching you. In both cases, a shot has been fired, and the room is waiting to see what you do next. Most people do one of 3 things, and all 3 of them lose. Option 1, they defend immediately. Actually, what I meant was, and now they're on trial. They've accepted the frame that they need to justify themselves. Every sentence they add is more evidence that the challenge worked. Option 2, they laugh it off. Nervous, energy, a tight smile, a shrug, and everyone reads it correctly. The shot landed. They absorbed it. They're shrinking. Option 3, they go silent, but the wrong kind of silent. Stiff, visibly rattled, radiating discomfort. Their jaw tightens. Their eyes go flat. The whole room feels the wound, even though no words were said. None of these are power. All of them are sending the same message to every brain in that room. I can be moved, and the person who moved me knows it. Here is what you do instead, and it is simple enough that you can practice it before you leave this video. You go quiet, but not wounded quiet, not frozen quiet, controlled quiet. You hold eye contact steady, unhurried, not aggressive, not cold, just present. You breathe. You let the silence stretch 3, 4, 5 full seconds past the point where it becomes uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable for you, uncomfortable for them. Then and only if you say anything at all. It is 1 sentence. Low, even, delivered without urgency, without heat. That's an interesting take. And then you move on. Completely, as if what they said registered as mildly curious and nothing more a minor feature of the landscape, not a threat that requires your full defensive response. Or you say nothing at all. You watch them for 1 beat. Then you shift your attention elsewhere, not dramatically, not pointedly, just naturally, as if they no longer require your focus, as if the moment has simply passed. That's the move, all of it. It will feel wrong. It will feel like you're letting them win. You are not letting them win. You are doing the exact opposite, and here's why. Let's talk about what's happening in 3 different brains simultaneously when you execute this first. First, their brain. Silence creates uncertainty, and the human brain is extraordinarily bad at sitting with uncertainty. The threat detection system, the same circuit that fires when you hear a noise in a dark room, activates. The brain starts scanning, generating possibilities, searching for information it cannot find. It asks, did that land? Did they hear me? Why aren't they reacting? Are they about to do something? When you defend immediately, you answer all those questions generously, fully, before they even had to ask twice. You confirm, yes, it landed. Yes, it rattled me. Here is exactly how you can get to me. You've handed them a map of your vulnerabilities, and they will use it. When you go quiet and controlled, you give them nothing. The loop stays open. Their brain is now the one under pressure, not yours. Their brain is generating anxiety, filling silences, wondering if they miscalculated. Second, the room's brain. Everyone observing is running a real-time status calculation. The brain reads calm, non-reaction as high status. This is not a cultural preference, it is automatic. It runs below conscious thought, and it is ancient. Low-status organisms react to threats immediately because they have to. High-status ones assess them first. The organism that can choose when to respond, rather than being compelled to respond, is the one with security, with options, with power. Think of it this way. When a lion walks through its territory, it does not flinch at every sound in the brush. Small animals do. Your nervous system has been tracking this signal for hundreds of thousands of years. So has every nervous system in that room. Third, your own brain. When you choose not to react, you are also training your own nervous system. You are demonstrating to yourself that you can experience a provocation and remain regulated. That is not a small thing. That is the foundation of everything else on this list. Machiavelli understood this at the level of political survival. A ruler who reacts visibly to every provocation signals that provocations work and implicitly invites more of them. The moment you demonstrate that your emotional state can be externally controlled, you have handed someone the lever to your behavior, and they will pull it. But doesn't saying nothing mean they got away with it? This is the most common objection. And it rests on a wrong assumption about what disrespect is trying to do. Most disrespect, especially the repeated pattern kind, is not primarily trying to hurt you. It is a test, a probe, a question being asked without words. Is this person rattled? Is this someone I can take from? Can I establish dominance here and keep it? Your silence controlled, calm, unhurried, answers that question directly and completely. No, not rattled, not rattleable in this way, not available for this particular dynamic. That is not letting them win. That is removing the entire game from the table. They came looking for a reaction. They got information about who they are dealing with instead. That information will change their behavior, not immediately, but consistently and permanently if you hold it. Rule 2. Never explain, clarify. Someone challenges you. Publicly. Maybe they question your competence in front of a room. Maybe they dismiss your idea with a rhetorical question. I mean, did you actually think that through? Delivered to get a laugh, not a real answer. Maybe they reframe your position into something easier to mock and let the reframe stand. And you feel it, the pull, the almost physical need to explain yourself, to walk them through your reasoning step by step, to make them understand that you are not wrong, not stupid, not out of your depth. You want to correct the record. You want them to see. So you explain. And as you explain, you watch their expression. And it is not what you hoped for. They are not updating. They are not reconsidering. They are watching you get more invested in convincing them. And that investment is its own data point, because every sentence you add is more evidence that the challenge worked. Every additional justification says, I needed to justify myself to you. and I am still justifying. And I will keep going until you give me the approval I need. The more you explain, the more you have confirmed that they have leverage over your emotional state. And the more leverage you have confirmed, the more they will use. Do not explain. Ask a question instead. What specifically concerns you about that? Can you say more about what you mean? What outcome were you expecting instead? What would you have done differently? Deliver it with genuine curiosity, not sarcasm, not barely concealed anger, actually open, actually waiting for their answer. Make it sound like you are interested in what they have to say, because a person who is not rattled can afford to be curious. Now you have done several things at once. You have forced them to be precise. You have made them construct a real argument, coherent, specific, defensible out loud, under social pressure in real time. You have moved the cognitive burden from you to them, and you have communicated, without a single word about it, that you are not in a defensive posture. You are in an investigative one. Here is what precision does to vague disrespect. It kills it. Most disrespect lives and breathes in vagueness. It fires from the shadows a tone, an implication, a rhetorical question that assumes its own answer. The moment outdrag it into precision, one of two things happens. They either produce a real substantive critique which you can actually engage with, or they expose that they had nothing concrete, just a poke, just a test, just a performance. Both outcomes belong to you, not them. Here is what is happening at the neurological level when you explain versus when you clarify. Explaining activates what researchers describe as the justification reflex, a behavior pattern your ego defense system runs when it perceives a social threat to your status or competence. The brain reads being challenged as potential social loss and immediately starts generating information to prevent that loss. The problem is that everyone watching you can read this process. And the reading is not "this person is thorough" or "this person cares about being accurate." The reading at the automatic gut level is "this person feels threatened." That is a status signal, and it moves against you. Asking a question does the opposite. It signals that you are not rattled. Because people who are rattled defend. They do not investigate. It signals that you have enough psychological security to be curious. And it shifts the cognitive burden back onto the other person. Now they are the one who must be precise, coherent, and publicly accountable for what they just said. They are the one performing under social pressure. And most people who lead with vague disrespect have not prepared to do that. Machiavelli called this principle fighting on your own terrain. He never allowed opponents to choose the battlefield, the framing, the timing, the terms of engagement. When they attacked in vague territory, he demanded they be specific. Specificity forced them to either commit to a claim they could not fully support or retreat from the attack entirely. The question is the trap, and it does not look like one. But what if they actually have a valid point? Then you will find out, because they will be able to articulate it. And once it is articulated clearly, you can engage with the actual substance. You can acknowledge what is valid. You can correct what is wrong. You can have a real exchange on level ground based on actual claims rather than performances. Clarifying does not mean refusing to be wrong. It means refusing to be wrong on their terms, at their pace, in their framing, while they hold the social pressure. You engage when the field is level, not before. Rule 3: delay your response on purpose. It comes as a message, a text, an email, a comment in the group chat, the one where multiple people are watching, and the person who sent it knows that. It's pointed, dismissive, maybe even designed to produce a fast emotional public reaction, because a fast reaction would be entertaining, would confirm their dominance, would give them exactly what they need. And your instinct is to respond immediately, to show them and everyone watching that you saw it, that you are not someone who gets pushed around, that you have a sharp, ready answer. So you respond, fast, sharp. In the moment, it feels like standing up for yourself. But look at what you have actually done. You responded in seconds, which means you were watching, which means you were waiting, which means the message consumed your attention the moment it arrived. Fast response equals high emotional investment. High emotional investment means they control the tempo. And tempo, who moves first, who waits, who responds to whom, is one of the clearest status signals in any social dynamic. You have just handed them the tempo, and the tempo is everything. Wait, on purpose, deliberately, as a choice, not a reaction. Not because you do not have an answer, you might have an excellent one, but because you understand what the timing of your response communicates entirely independently of its content. Hours if the situation allows, a full day if the stakes are lower and the audience has moved on. Then respond, briefly, calmly, as if the message registered as mildly notable and was added to a mental list of things to address when convenient. Not cold, not passive-aggressive, not designed to send a message about itself, just measured, natural, the response of someone who has other things going on. Because that is exactly what the delay communicates, without you having to say a single word about it. Your message did not stop my day. I have a life that does not reorganize itself around your provocations. I responded when it suited me, not when you wanted me to. My attention is not on permanent availability to you. All of that from the timing alone. Before anyone reads a single word of your reply, immediate response signals that their move mattered. Your attention was already there. You were ready. To the brain reading social signals, that reads as anxiety, not authority. Someone secure enough in their position does not snap to attention at every provocation. Delayed response activates something psychologists describe as reactance, a cognitive and emotional state that fires when access or attention is reduced, withdrawn, or delayed. The brain starts wanting what it can no longer easily access. This is the same mechanism behind why people want things more when they become scarce. When you delay, their brain starts generating questions. Did they see it? Are they unbothered? Are they above this? Are they thinking of something really precise? The uncertainty creates a seeking state. The brain wants resolution and cannot find it, and that absence of resolution is itself a form of pressure. Meanwhile, your perceived status in the interaction increases, because status is partially determined by who waits for whom. The person whose time is not immediately available is the person with options. Options signal resources, security, alternatives. Alternatives are power. There is a reason why the most powerful people in any organization are the hardest to reach. That inaccessibility is not always accidental. At some level, conscious or not, it is a status signal being broadcast constantly. Machiavelli never moved in haste when patience would serve better. He understood that in any game of influence, the slower player often wins, because by the time everyone else has committed and revealed their hand, the patient player has more information and more choices. The delay is not passivity. It is not avoidance. It is the refusal to let someone else's provocations set the tempo of your life. Isn't this just being petty or playing games? Here is the difference. Petty is when the delay is calculated to make them feel bad. When you are watching the clock and thinking about how long you should wait to punish them with your absence. This is different. You are not thinking about them at all. You are living your life doing your work, talking to other people, building things. You respond when it is convenient for you, because it is convenient for you. That is it. The fact that this also happens to communicate exactly the right signal is a natural consequence of having actual priorities, not a game. A life that is full enough that it does not stop for every piece of bait someone throws at it. Rule 4, remove the reward. Some people disrespect you because they get something from it. Not all disrespect is calculated. Some of it is impulsive, some of it is habitual, but a significant portion, particularly the repeated, pattern kind, is reward-driven. Something about what happens when they do it makes it worth doing again. Maybe the reward is your visible reaction, the way your face changes, the way your voice tightens, the way you fumble for a response, and they get to watch that process and feel powerful. Maybe the reward is social. They say something sharp about you and the group laughs, or at least shifts uncomfortably, and they feel the brief, potent sensation of control over a social room. Maybe the reward is simpler. You engage, you argue back, and the argument itself is the reward, because in the argument they have your full, undivided, emotionally invested attention. And some people are addicted to that. Whatever the reward is, you have been delivering it consistently. And that is why the behavior has not stopped. You are not the victim of someone's cruelty. You are, without knowing it, part of a reinforcement loop. The loop continues for as long as it produces results. Remove the reward. Completely. Quietly. Not with a speech about how they always do this. Not with cold anger. Not with a pointed withdrawal that signals you are angry underneath. With nothing. Genuine. Flat. Undramatic nothing. No flinch. No sharp intake of breath. No tight jaw. No overcompensating pleasantness that signals you are working hard to appear unbothered. No argument, no engagement, no eye contact if possible. Just next topic. Business as usual. As if the provocation registered at roughly the level of a door closing down the hall. And you do this consistently, not once consistently, because the brain needs multiple cycles of non-reward before it stops producing a behavior. The behavior will extinguish, not because they became a better person, because the calculation stopped working. The mechanism, this is operant conditioning. The same system that powers slot machines, social media notifications, and every other behavioral loop you have ever gotten stuck in. Behavior that produces a reward gets repeated. Behavior that stops producing rewards gets extinguished. This is not a theory or a model. It is how the brain literally encodes and maintains behavior at the neurological level. When you remove the emotional reward consistently, the disrespect loses its function, and functionless behavior, without reinforcement, fades. It does not fade immediately. It fades over multiple iterations as the brain recalibrates what this action produces, but it fades. Here is the counterintuitive part. Removing the reward looks, from the outside, like you do not care, like nothing landed, like you are genuinely unbothered. And reading that perception of genuine unbotheredness is itself a form of consequence. There is almost nothing more destabilizing to someone who wants a reaction than not getting one. The absence of the expected response is its own signal. It communicates something about the gap between their provocation and your threshold. Machiavelli understood this at a strategic level. The most devastating response to an opponent's maneuver is not a counter-maneuver. It is not registering the maneuver as a significant threat at all, not as performance as genuine assessment, because when you do not need to react, you have communicated something about the difference in your positions. And people feel that difference even when they cannot articulate it. What if they escalate because they're not getting a reaction? Sometimes they will, and this is actually a predictable neurological event with a name: extinction burst. When a behavior that has reliably produced a reward stops producing the reward, the brain's first response is not to abandon the behavior. It is to try harder, to escalate, to do the behavior louder, more frequently, more intensely, as if the reward is still there somewhere and just requires more effort to reach. This looks like them getting worse before they get better. And most people at this point react because the escalation is genuinely harder to absorb. But if you react during the burst, you have just rewarded persistence. You have taught them that escalation works. And now it takes more provocation to get a reaction from you, which means more provocation is what they will deploy. Hold through the burst. It ends. The behavior collapses after the burst if the reward is genuinely gone. The burst is not a sign that the strategy is failing. It is a sign that it is working. Rule 5. The strategic public correction. This one is going to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is the point. The disrespect happens in public, in front of a group that matters. Your colleagues, your social circle, your peers. People whose perception of you has real effects on your life. Maybe they misrepresent what you said. Maybe they take credit for your contribution and do it casually, like it is nothing. Maybe they make a joke at your expense landed smoothly enough that calling it out feels like overreacting. Maybe they undermine a decision you made in front of the people who need to trust that decision, and you have been absorbing it, telling yourself it is not worth the conflict, telling yourself the people who matter can see through it, telling yourself that taking the high road is the sophisticated move. I want to tell you something directly. The high road in this context is a story you are telling yourself to avoid a thing that is uncomfortable to do. The people who matter, the group watching, are not making the generous assumptions you are hoping they are making. They are reading what your behavior tells them, and your behavior has been telling them consistently that this person's version of events goes unchallenged. That is the record, and it is building. Correct them. Once, publicly, without heat, not a confrontation, not a takedown, not a scene. A correction delivered with the same tone you woe. Old used to note that the meeting has been moved to Thursday. Actually, let me correct that what I said was X. I want to make sure the record is accurate. That work was mine. That's a generous interpretation of my position. What I actually said was, why? Say it clearly, say it once, and then move on completely to the next agenda point, the next person, the next topic, as if the correction was a minor administrative note that required brief acknowledgement and nothing more. Do not wait for a reaction. Do not scan the room. Do not pile on. Do not gloat. Correct and release. That is the entire move. Public disrespect is a status bid. It is not just between you and the person making the move. It is a signal broadcast to the entire group, and every brain in that group is running a real-time social hierarchy calculation based on what it observes. When you absorb public disrespect, silently, the group's calculation updates against you, not because they dislike you, not because they think less of you as a person, but because status hierarchies are built on observable behavioral evidence, and the behavioral evidence has just suggested that this person does not challenge misrepresentation of themselves. A single, calm public correction reverses that update. It sends two signals simultaneously. First, the factual record has changed. The information in the room is now different. The misrepresentation no longer stands unchallenged. Second, this person notices and is not destabilized. They can correct a public challenge with calm precision and move on without drama. That is a specific kind of capability, and the group's brain registers it automatically. The calmness is load-bearing. An angry correction looks defensive. It suggests the provocation reached somewhere deep enough to produce heat, to loosen your composure. A calm, precise correction looks like someone who simply see, and it be misrepresented, not because they fight about it, but because they address it clearly and do not require it to be a fight. This is one of Machiavelli's most durable principles. You do not need to win every confrontation. You need people to understand that engaging you dishonestly has a cost. One calm, public correction executed precisely once establishes that cost. The next misrepresentation becomes harder to attempt because the room now knows it will be corrected. What if they get defensive and it turns into a conflict? You are not responsible for their defensiveness. You corrected a record. You did it calmly. You moved on. If they choose to escalate from there, they are now making a scene over a factual correction in front of the same people who just watched you handle it with composure. That information belongs to the group too, and it tells the group something about them, not you. Your role is complete once you have corrected and released. What they do with their reaction is their business, and their reaction, whatever it is, will add to the record, not yours. Rule 6, reduce access. Without announcing it, this rule is for the person who keeps doing it, not the single incident. You have tools for that now. This is the repeating pattern, the person who has been disrespecting you across multiple interactions, multiple settings, over a span of time. The person you cannot immediately or easily remove from your life, a coworker, a family member, someone embedded in a social circle you share. You have tried responses. You have stayed calm. You have clarified instead of explained. You have removed the reward. Nothing has fundamentally changed. And so most people do the next thing. They have the conversation. They explain clearly how the behavior makes them feel. They set explicit limits. They ask for change. The other person listens, agrees, maybe even apologizes sincerely. And then, after some time has passed, they do it again. This happens because announced limits are arguments, and arguments can be engaged with, negotiated around, forgotten, or simply not taken seriously by someone who has demonstrated through their behavior that they do not fundamentally respect your limits in the first place. The announcement changes the conversation. It does not change the behavior. Consequences change the behavior, quietly reduce what they have access to, without saying a single word about it. The personal details of your life, your plans, your vulnerabilities, your thinking, all of which you have been sharing freely, all of which has provided ammunition, becomes less available to them. Not dramatically, gradually, less emotional availability. Your conversations with them become shorter, more surface level, less open. You are not hostile. You are not cold. You are simply less present, less accessible at depth. Less time, fewer situations where you share space with them, where this is not possible. You are there less fully. Your attention is elsewhere. You leave earlier. No announcement, no speech, no heavy conversation about what you are doing and why. Just a quiet, consistent, systematic reduction in what they can reach. The adjustment is internal. It is real. And over time, it becomes visible through patterns of behavior, not through declarations. Here's what happens in their brain when access is reduced without explanation. They enter a seeking state. The dopamine system, which drives motivation and searching behavior, not just pleasure, activates. The brain wants to resolve the open question. What changed? Why is this person less available? Did I do something? What do I need to do to restore what I had? And because there was no announcement, no declared limit to push back against, no argument to engage. E with no position to challenge or dismiss. There is nothing to fight. There is only the changed reality, and they have to reckon with it directly. People almost always, over time, begin to recalibrate their behavior toward whatever it takes to restore access they have lost. Not because you have punished them, because the natural consequence of their behavior has been a reduction in something they valued. And natural consequences are harder to dismiss than stated limits, because they cannot be argued with. Machiavelli was clear on this. The most effective limits are demonstrated through action, not declared through words. A declaration gives your opponent something to negotiate, to promise around, to perform compliance with while actually changing nothing. Behavior gives them nothing to negotiate. It is simply the new reality. Their options are to adapt to it or lose access entirely. That is a sharper incentive than any conversation. Isn't withdrawing without explanation passive-aggressive? Passive aggression is when you are angry and hiding it when you are punishing someone while performing normalcy, creating tension that everyone can feel but no one can address. This is categorically different. You are not hiding anger. You are making a clear-eyed adjustment based on what someone has demonstrated about how they use the access they are given. You are allocating your time and emotional energy toward people and situations that use it respectfully. That is not aggression, passive or otherwise. That is discernment, and you owe no one a speech about your discernment. Rule 7. Upgrade yourself visibly. Slower delivery from here. More weight. Let this one land fully. Most people skip this rule, or they hear it and think, yes, I know, be successful, helpful. And they move on to look for something more tactical, more immediate. But I want you to stay with this one, because this is not a consolation prize. This is the structural change. Everything else on this list is reactive. It is how you handle disrespect when it arrives. This rule changes the environment itself. It changes what it makes sense to do to you at all. Think about the people you know or know of who almost never seem to get disrespected. Not because they are aggressive or intimidating. Not because they make threats or perform dominance, but something about their presence, their trajectory, their visible options, makes the calculation come out differently. Disrespecting them feels less rational. The potential downside feels larger. The reward feels smaller. The whole enterprise feels like a miscalculation. That is not accident. That is the result of a particular kind of investment made over time, maintained consistently. And you can make it too. Upgrade yourself in the areas that matter visibly, consistently, without announcing that this is what you are doing. Your career take the next step. Build the skill that puts you in a different category. Make the move that changes your options. Let it be observable through your outputs, your positioning, your opportunities. Your circles spend more deliberate time with people who operate at a level you are working toward. The quality of your associations is a status signal, whether or not you intend it to be. It shapes how others calibrate your position. Your physical presence. This is not vanity. Physical presentation is one of the fastest process status signals the brain runs. It happens in milliseconds, below conscious thought. It is not fair. It is real. Your competence, your output, your projects, what are you building? What can people see you building? Not for their approval, for the honest signal it sends about where you are going. Let the trajectory be visible, not performed, not announced, just real, and the for visible. Status is not absolute. It is relative, continuously recalibrated against others in your social environment. Your perceived position is not fixed. It is a live ranking running in every brain around you, updated by every piece of new information they receive. about where you are and where you are heading. When you upgrade visibly, two distinct neurological events occur in the people around you. The first is status recalibration, the brain's social hierarchy tracker, which operates largely below conscious awareness, detects new data and updates the ranking. The person who was previously dismissed now occupies a different position. This recalibration is not a choice the observer makes. It happens automatically. It cannot be prevented by their opinion of you, because it runs below that level. The second is cognitive dissonance. The observer's brain is now holding two contradictory pieces of information. I dismissed this person, and this person is clearly operating at a level I respect. The brain cannot comfortably hold both. It resolves the contradiction by revising one of them. Almost always, it revises the dismissal. Your trajectory writes the record in their memory. This is why the trajectory matters more than the comeback. A comeback wins the moment. It shuts down one instance of disrespect. It feels satisfying. A trajectory wins the narrative. It changes what it is logical for people to think about you, permanently, without requiring another confrontation. Machiavelli invested his energy carefully. He did not waste it on people who were not worth his focus. He invested it into becoming someone whose approval meant something, whose network opened doors, whose disapproval had weight. When you operate at a level that matters, the calculation other people run about you changes not because you demanded it change, but because the data changed. A and T, the people who disrespected you. One of two things happens. Either they recalibrate, the dissonance resolves. They treat you differently because the ranking says they should. Or they do not, and you no longer need them to. Because your upgrade has given you something that tactics alone cannot. Options. The option to exit. The option to not care about this particular person's assessment. The option to build your life in a different direction entirely. That is not passive. That is the most durable power move on this list. What if I improve and they still disrespect me? Then you have outgrown the room, and that is its own answer. The upgrade was never about making them treat you better. It was about expanding your options until this particular person's opinion stops being something your life is structured around. That is not a consolation. That is freedom. Not from them, from the need for them. You came into this video carrying something. A moment, maybe a series of them where you absorbed what you should not have had to absorb, where you did not know what to do, where you walked away feeling like you lost something and were not entirely sure what. I want to say something to you directly, and I want you to actually hear it. You were never powerless. You were playing the game without knowing the rules. That is not weakness. That is just not having been shown this. Most people treat disrespect as a personal attack to endure something to survive, smooth over, replay later, argue about in their head at 2 a.m. The people who move through the world with genuine, undramatic authority treat it as data, as a calculation to be adjusted, as a signal about where they are and what move comes next. That is what these 7 rules give you. The quiet that builds pressure instead of releasing it. The question that forces precision and collapses vague attacks. The delay that signals a full life and communicates options. The flat effect that removes the reward and starves the loop. The correction that is calm and exact and moves on. The reduced access that speaks louder than any speech you could give. The trajectory that renders the original disrespect eventually, permanently, beside the point. These are not tricks. They are not manipulation. They are how power actually moves between people in real rooms, in real dynamics, where the rules are not always posted and the playing field is not always level. Machiavelli did not write for the comfortable. He wrote for people surrounded by forces they could not always control. trying to understand what they could control and use it with precision. You are in that position. You always were. The difference now is that you understand the game. Act accordingly.